Welcome to Egypt. The desert is quiet here. The wind moves slowly across the sand, warm and steady, brushing over the stones and dunes like it has for thousands of years. The air is dry and soft, and the horizon stretches wide in every direction. In the distance, rising out of the earth with impossible calm, stands the Great Pyramid of Giza. It is older than the language you're hearing now, older than the city of Rome, older than paper, and yet it still waits in the quiet sun, as it always has. In this slow and gentle story, we'll explore the Great Pyramid together. We'll walk through what we know, what we believe, and what remains uncertain. We'll talk about the stone, the people, the purpose, and the enduring wonder of what was built here so long ago. There's no need to rush, no need to hold on. You can drift in and out as you please. The pyramid is patient. It has waited this long. It will wait a little longer. You are in Giza, at the edge of the Nile Valley, a place where desert meets memory. For thousands of years, people have come here to gaze upward, to wonder, to ask questions that stretch across time. This pyramid, the largest of the three on the Giza Plateau, was built over 4,500 years ago during Egypt's 4th dynasty. Attributed to Pharaoh Khufu, it once stood taller than it does now, its outer casing smooth and reflective, designed to shine beneath the sun like a beacon for the afterlife. But before anything could be built, the ancient Egyptians needed stone. Not just a few blocks, not even a few thousand. The Great Pyramid required an estimated 2.3 million stone blocks, each one shaped, moved, and placed by human hands. The sheer volume of it is quieting. Even now, knowing the numbers, it feels almost unreal. Most of the pyramid's mass is made from limestone, pale, warm, and weathered. This limestone came from a nearby quarry just southeast of the pyramid itself. In some places you can still see where the rock was cut away. These were the core blocks, rougher, softer, and easier to shape. They made up the bulk of the structure, hidden beneath the surface. But for the outer layers, for the polished surface that once gleamed in the sunlight, the builders used a finer limestone. This was brought in from Tura, across the Nile. It was smoother, denser, and nearly white. When placed in the sun, it would have glowed softly, catching light in a way that made the pyramid seem less like a structure and more like a presence. Inside, the passageways and chambers were lined with granite, hard, dark, and almost impervious to erosion. This granite came from Aswan, hundreds of miles to the south, transported along the Nile by boat. The blocks weighed up to 80 tons. Just moving them into place was a feat in itself. How exactly the stones were lifted, shaped, and set remains a point of discussion. Ramps, levers, ropes, water. Each theory holds some truth, but none can fully explain the ease and accuracy with which it was done. And perhaps that's part of the story. Not that it was impossible, but that it was simply done, one stone at a time. There is comfort in that, in knowing that something so enormous was not dropped from the sky, but built through quiet repetition, stone by stone by stone. The Great Pyramid stands not only as a monument to stone, but to movement, moving over 2 million blocks, some weighing as much as 80 tons, without modern machines, without iron tools, and without wheels, still raises questions that feel too big for bedtime, but we'll walk through them slowly. The most widely accepted theory involves ramps, simple in concept, practical in principle. The straight ramp theory suggests a massive ramp, stretching out in front of the pyramid as it rose, with workers hauling stones upward using sledges, ropes and wooden rollers. But the ramp itself would have needed to be longer than the pyramid is tall, hundreds of meters long, and built with enough material to rival the pyramid's own volume. Then there's the zigzag ramp theory, a switchback-style ramp climbing up one face of the pyramid in a back-and-forth pattern. This would save material and space, but would also make turning massive stone blocks at tight corners less than ideal. A variation on that is the spiral ramp theory, winding around the outside of the pyramid, circling upward as construction progressed. The downside, the spiral would block the view of the corners and faces during construction, making precision alignment difficult, and the pyramid is very precisely aligned. Another theory suggests an internal spiral, a ramp built inside the pyramid's shell using open gaps in the structure itself. It would have been dark, narrow and efficient, but there's limited evidence for this, and much of it is speculative. Then there's the wet sand theory. Ancient illustrations show workers pouring water in front of sledges, and modern experiments suggest that wetting the sand can reduce friction significantly, allowing large stones to slide more easily across wooden sleds. This wouldn't lift the stones, but it would move them horizontally with less effort. Still others propose counterweight systems using levers, pulleys, and human-powered winches, or even a seesaw method to gradually tilt stones upward one level at a time. And then there are the more imaginative theories, that sound waves were used to levitate stones, that alien technologies were involved, that giants did it. These ideas are more myth than method, but they persist, perhaps because they echo the awe we still feel when standing in front of something so exact and so enduring. What's most likely is this: no single method explains it all. The builders probably used a combination of techniques, adjusted over time, passed down from one generation of workers to the next. Not impossible, just practiced, over years, over lifetimes, lifted by hands, pulled by rope, balanced by knowledge. The Great Pyramid was not built in a single moment of triumph. It was built in quiet, repeating actions, one layer at a time. At its base, the pyramid measures about 230 meters along each side, nearly the length of 2.5 football fields. From that foundation, the builders worked upward, stacking layer upon layer of limestone, gradually tapering inward with each step. As the pyramid rose, its structure narrowed, its weight pressed downward, and its geometry became more precise. The lowest layers were the largest. Massive blocks weighing several tons each were placed with care, forming a steady base. As the layers climbed higher, the stones became smaller, lighter, easier to maneuver, not by accident, but by design. This distribution of weight allowed the structure to hold firm, century after century. Each course, or level, had to be leveled perfectly before the next could be laid. If a single layer was uneven, the entire structure could shift over time. So the workers leveled the surface using tools as simple as copper chisels, plumb lines, and lengths of string, and perhaps pools of water to find true horizontal. The building process took time, not years, decades. Most scholars estimate around 20 years for full construction, though some say less. That may seem slow, but when you consider the scale, it reveals a rhythm of work that was consistent, deliberate, and deeply practiced. There were no cranes, no lifts, no quick solutions. Each block was placed by hand, adjusted, nudged into position, and once one layer was finished, the next would begin, again and again, one level at a time, rising higher, growing quieter, becoming more than just stone. Eventually those courses reached the sky, and at the very top something different was placed. But we'll get there. In time, behind every stone of the Great Pyramid was a hand, not a machine, not a legend, not a supernatural force, a person. For centuries, it was widely believed that slaves built the pyramids, that this structure rose from suffering and chains. But the evidence tells a different story, one of the organisation, craftsmanship, and human will. Archaeological discoveries near the pyramids, including worker cemeteries, tools, bakeries, and even medical facilities, suggest the builders were skilled labourers, not enslaved people. Many of them were farmers, recruited during the flood season when their fields lay underwater. When the Nile swelled, they came to Giza. They worked in rotating crews, perhaps 2,000 to 5,000 at a time, divided into teams with names like the Friends of Khufu or the Drunkards of Menkora. There's even graffiti left behind by these groups on hidden stones, playful and ordinary, the way modern crews might sign a steel beam before sealing it into a skyscraper. They lived in nearby workers' villages with bread ovens, breweries, sleeping quarters, and spaces to share meals. Their diet included bread, onions, and beer, a thick, hearty brew, less intoxicating than nutritional. They weren't wealthy, but they weren't disposable either. These were not random labourers. They were craftsmen, stone cutters, haulers, surveyors, foremen, people who knew how to shape rock, read the slope of a ramp, and make small adjustments that would ripple upward for hundreds of feet. There were injuries, evidence of broken bones, but also signs of care, bones that had healed, joints that had been reset. Someone tended to them. Someone made sure they could return to the work. Their names are mostly lost, their voices too, but their fingerprints remain, pressed invisibly into the stone, quiet, firm, and enduring. The construction of the Great Pyramid was more than a project. It was a world. Around the base of the growing monument, an entire temporary city emerged, not one of monuments and rituals, but of daily life, of work, of motion, of rest. The workers lived nearby, in a purpose-built village with long stone dormitories, communal ovens, water basins, and simple courtyards. It was dusty, loud, and busy, but organised. The kind of place that hummed with a steady rhythm, like the sound of tools tapping against stone. Bakers prepared thousands of loaves a day. Brewers tended to open vats of barley and yeast, producing a thick beer that served as both drink and sustenance. Livestock were butchered on site, cattle, sheep, and goats, and salted for preservation. The labour wasn't just on the pyramid, it was in the kitchens, the workshops, the storerooms. Over the years, archaeologists have found fish bones, grinding stones, jars of oil, and graffiti scratched into blocks. Notes, names, quiet reminders that people passed through here. Not pharaohs, but builders. Children may have played near the edges. Dogs followed scraps. Fires burned low at night. In the distance, the Nile shimmered in the sun. Boats arrived, carrying stone, food, and materials, then departed again, pulled by the current. The air would have smelled of earth and wood, sweat and bread, not grand, not ceremonial, but human. There was a rhythm to it all. You wake, you eat, you lift, you build, and the pyramid rises a little more, and then the sun begins to set. There's a stillness to the Great Pyramid, Each side of its base is nearly the same length, within just a few centimetres of one another. The structure is aligned almost perfectly to the cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west. This was not guesswork. This was knowledge. Ancient, silent, and deeply intentional. How did they do it? Many believe the builders used the stars. By tracking the rising and setting points of specific stars on the horizon, perhaps the bright star Sirius or the movement of Orion's belt, they could establish true north with surprising accuracy. Others suggest they used the shadow of a vertical stick at different times of day, watching how it moved across the sand to find the cardinal points. Simple, but effective. The pyramid's sides were originally angled at about 51.5 degrees. This angle, repeated all the way up, created a smooth and rising face that would have gleamed when its limestone casing was intact, a slope that caught the sun during the day and reflected the moonlight at night. Some researchers have proposed that the pyramid encodes mathematical constants, like pi or the golden ratio. The truth is, it's hard to say whether these values were known, or whether they simply emerged as a result of practical geometry. The Egyptians weren't writing equations the way we do, but they understood balance, harmony, proportion, and they built it into stone. There's also speculation about the pyramid's alignment with Orion's belt, part of a theory that all three pyramids at Giza were laid out to match the stars. The correspondence isn't exact, but it's close enough to suggest a possible inspiration. In ancient Egypt, the stars weren't just lights in the sky. They were guides, symbols, pathways to the afterlife. The Great Pyramid, then, may have been more than a tomb. It may have been a celestial gateway, its four faces pointing to the ends of the earth, its peak reaching toward the heavens. Built not just to last, but to align. From the outside, the Great Pyramid is all weight and silence, but inside, it's narrower, quieter, colder. The entrance, once hidden beneath polished limestone, now sits exposed on the north face, a dark mouth opening into the stone. From there, a sloping passageway descends deep into the pyramid, cut with careful angles and low ceilings. The temperature drops. The light fades. This is the descending passage. It leads downward into the bedrock, passing by a second tunnel, the ascending passage, which branches upward toward the heart of the pyramid. Both paths are steep, just over 1 meter high. Tall visitors stoop. The air is still. Following the ascending corridor brings you to the Grand Gallery, a long vaulted space unlike anything else in the structure. It stretches upward for nearly 9 meters, with corbelled walls that narrow near the ceiling. No one is entirely certain why it was built this way. Some think it was ceremonial, others say it helped relieve pressure from the massive weight above. The Grand Gallery leads directly to the King's Chamber, a rectangular room lined with red granite blocks, each one perfectly fitted. Inside, the chamber is almost empty, just a stone box, the sarcophagus, carved from a single block of granite. No inscriptions, no markings, only stillness. Above it are 5 relieving chambers, stacked like shelves to distribute the pyramid's weight and prevent collapse. These chambers are raw, unfinished, and their ceilings bear the ancient graffiti of the work crews that built them. Names, dates, teams, left behind and sealed for thousands of years. Further below, another space, the Queen's Chamber, smaller, simpler. Its purpose remains debated. Some believe it was symbolic. Others think it was part of an earlier plan that was later changed. And even deeper, the unfinished subterranean chamber, carved directly into the bedrock. It's rough, abandoned, a reminder that even in a monument of precision, some things were left behind. Inside the pyramid, time seems to hold its breath. The corridors are narrow, the light is gone, but the stone remains, exactly where it was placed thousands of years ago, waiting. In the ancient Egyptian world, death was not a destination. It was a transformation, a long, uncertain journey into the unseen. To help the pharaoh reach that next stage of existence, the Great Pyramid was not merely a tomb. It was a carefully designed tool, a spiritual engine, a vessel for crossing into eternity. Egyptian belief described the soul not as one thing, but many. The Ka, the life force, needed nourishment. The Ba, a personality that could move freely between worlds, needed recognition. The Yak, the transformed spirit, was the ultimate goal, a being of light, unified with the stars and the divine. The Great Pyramid was meant to assist in that transformation, and yet it contains no inscriptions, no decorative reliefs, no pyramid texts carved into its walls. This is unusual. Later pyramids are filled with spells and prayers, but Khufu's is silent, blank, as though the power was not in words, but in structure. Instead, the pyramid was part of a wider ritual complex. Attached to its base was a mortuary temple, where priests performed daily offerings long after Khufu's death, bringing food, lighting incense, pouring water, speaking the names of the dead to keep their memory alive. These were not symbolic acts. They were fuel. The Ka was believed to feed on these rituals. A covered causeway once connected this temple to a valley temple near the Nile, forming a symbolic journey from the river of life up toward the eternal stone. That path represented the crossing from this world into the next, walked not just in funerals, but again and again in ritual reenactments. No burial goods were ever found inside the pyramid, but it would have once held the most sacred items, statues of the pharaoh, ritual vessels, perhaps even the opening of the mouth tool, a forked instrument used in ceremonies to restore the senses to the deceased. Eyes to see, ears to hear, a mouth to speak offerings into existence. Defences were built too, not traps exactly, but spiritual protections. Narrow shafts, sealed chambers, granite portcullises to block intruders and shield the king's remains from desecration. All of it, down to the shape of each passage, served a function: to preserve the body, to elevate the soul, to convert one human being into something undying. Not in metaphor, but in reality as they understood it. The pyramid was more than stone. It was a ritual frozen in architecture. But for a structure that spent 4,500 years being called perfect, the Great Pyramid is full of mistakes. Small ones, quiet ones, the kind of errors only visible to those who stare at stone for a living. Fortunately, that includes us. Let's begin with something subtle: the base. Each side of the pyramid was meant to measure exactly the same. They almost do. But as touched on earlier, if you measure carefully, one side is about 21 centimeters longer than the others. Not catastrophic, but not perfect either. The angles of the corners also vary slightly, off by fractions of a degree. Over 230 meters, even a tiny miscalculation starts to show. Inside, the walls of the descending passage deviate from straightness. The tunnel narrows and shifts in a way that suggests the builders were making real-time corrections. Maybe the rock was harder than expected. Maybe a line was misdrawn. Or maybe, as one Egyptologist once said, they didn't think we'd be measuring it 4,000 years later. The Grand Gallery, That tall vaulted ramp leading to the king's chamber is beautiful and deeply strange. No one really knows why it's so large or so steep. Some suggest it was ceremonial, others think it was just over-engineered. Either way, it's the architectural equivalent of using a cathedral ceiling for a hallway. Then there are the 5 relieving chambers stacked above the king's chamber. These were built to deflect weight and keep the ceiling from collapsing, and they work. But the uppermost chamber includes a block that was never finished or properly placed. It just sits there, as though the builders gave up halfway through lunch and nobody followed up. One of the most famous oddities is the Big Void, a mysterious space discovered in 2017 using cosmic ray scanning technology. It's above the Grand Gallery and is roughly the size of an airplane. No one knows what it's for. A hidden chamber, a weight-relieving gap, a miscalculation. The pyramid, as usual, offers no explanation. There are also errant tool marks, chisel slips, slight misalignments. Nothing that breaks the structure, just small, human fingerprints left in the margins of a masterpiece. And honestly, that's the charm. The pyramid isn't perfect, it's resilient. It was never meant to be flawless, it was meant to endure, and it has. Just southeast of the Great Pyramid, past the crumbled outlines of temples, past the fading edge of the causeway, something waits in the sand. The Great Sphinx of Giza. It doesn't say much. It never has. But it's been watching for a very long time. Carved directly from the limestone bedrock, the Sphinx stretches about 73 meters in length, with the body of a crouching lion and the head of a human, most likely a pharaoh, though which one is still debated. Some say Khafre, builder of the second pyramid. Others suggest Khufu himself. The Sphinx isn't offering clarification. Architecturally, the Sphinx is unusual, not because of what it is, but because of how it was made. It wasn't built, it was revealed. Instead of stacking blocks, workers removed the surrounding limestone until the figure remained, shaped and smoothed out of the natural rock, like an enormous negative space turned positive. The stone removed from around it was then likely used to build nearby temples, creating a closed loop of material. Nothing wasted. The Sphinx temple, just in front of the monument, was made from large limestone blocks, some weighing up to 200 tons, cut with remarkable precision. The floor stones are levelled so finely that even modern restorers have struggled to replicate the effect. And yet, for all that skill, the Sphinx has suffered. Its face is heavily weathered, its nose is missing, probably chiselled off, not shot off, despite the old myths involving Napoleon's artillery. The beard, once attached to the chin, now lies in fragments in a museum. Its body has been buried by sand multiple times throughout history, only to be dug out again like some ancient cat playing hide-and-seek with civilization. There are deeper mysteries too. Erosion patterns on the body don't match what wind and sand typically leave behind. Some geologists argue the damage looks more like water wear, sparking theories that the Sphinx may be far older than we think, carved during a wetter time in Egypt's past. That's a minority view, but it's an open question. As for its purpose, it's never been fully explained. Guardian of the necropolis, symbol of royal power, sun god in leonine form. Maybe all of those, maybe none. Still it sits, weathered, cracked, missing pieces, and yet somehow completely unmoved. The pyramids rise behind it, the desert shifts around it, but the Sphinx just watches. For all its weight, the Great Pyramid was never fully secure. Even before the ancient dust had settled, someone, or many someones, had already found a way inside. The story of the pyramid is not just one of construction, but intrusion, of defences built in stone, and the quiet determination of those who worked around them. Let's start with what was actually meant to keep the pyramid sealed. At the end of the ascending passage, just before the Grand Gallery begins, 3 large granite blocks were inserted vertically into a channel, like stone plungers, dropped down to plug the tunnel below. Once lowered into place, they would have been almost impossible to remove. Smooth, tightly fit, and weighing multiple tons each. It was a clever barrier, and it didn't work. Somewhere early in history, robbers simply carved a new passage around the blockage, known today as the Robber's Tunnel. Crude and sloping, it cuts through softer limestone to reconnect with the main passage system. Not elegant, but effective. There's no evidence that any of the pyramid's contents, if they were ever placed, survived into modern times. The sarcophagus in the king's chamber is empty. No treasure, no coffin, not even a scrap of gold leaf. If burial goods were placed inside, they've long since vanished. The builders seem to know this was a risk. The interior passages narrow in strange places. Some doorways taper sharply, making it difficult to maneuver large items in or out. The Queen's chamber, with its distinctive corbelled roof and unused shafts, may have been a decoy, a deliberate misdirection. Some scholars believe it was part of a false burial plan, a kind of architectural mislead to draw attention away from the real tomb. But here's the architectural truth. The pyramid was never designed to keep everyone out. Even the blocking stones and passages weren't meant to trap intruders permanently. They were more symbolic acts of closure, sealing the pharaoh's path to the afterlife, not building a bank vault. Later tombs in the Valley of the Kings would include more elaborate traps, fake corridors, hidden doors, cursed inscriptions. But here, everything was simpler, heavier, more focused on eternity than secrecy. Still, the fact remains. Someone got in. Someone chipped away at the stone, crawled through darkness, and opened something that wasn't meant to be touched. And now, what remains is emptiness. No treasure, no guards, just echoing passages and granite walls that were once thought to be impenetrable. To modern eyes, the Great Pyramid is a monument. To the ancient Egyptians, it was something closer to a message, a statement carved into the earth in stone and angle, built not to impress us, but to affirm them. This was not just a tomb for Khufu, it was a declaration of what a king could be, not just powerful, but eternal, and its architecture was the medium of that belief. In form, the pyramid was a geometric leap forward. Earlier tombs, known as mastabas, were flat-roofed rectangles, low and broad, like benches pressed into the sand. Over time, these mastabas were stacked, layer by layer, until they became step pyramids, the most famous being the one at Saqqara, built by the architect Imhotep centuries before Khufu. But here, the shape was smoothed, refined. What had once been a staircase to the heavens became a seamless slope, a single unified ascent. The pyramid at Giza was not only bigger than anything before it, it was cleaner, sharper, intentional. That smooth-sided form mattered. It wasn't just about aesthetics. The pyramid mirrored the primordial mound, a mythic rise of land said to have emerged from the waters of chaos at the beginning of time. To build a pyramid was to echo creation itself, and in doing so, Khufu didn't just place himself in history, he placed himself outside of it. Architecturally, it represented control, over matter, over scale, over space and time. Its orientation was cosmically aligned, its dimensions were calculated, Its construction pushed stone to the edge of human capacity and then calmly crossed it. Politically, the pyramid was a symbol of centralized power. You don't move millions of blocks across a desert without a system, a supply chain, a workforce, a society willing or required to put its energy toward one man's permanence. And yet, in its silence, it transcends that function. No plaques, no victory carvings, just proportion and shadow. The pyramid hasn't moved, but everything around it has. For over 4,500 years, the Great Pyramid has stood under the open sky, while the world beneath that sky has changed completely. When it was first completed, the pyramid would have shimmered, its outer casing made of polished white Tura limestone, reflected the sunlight with a soft, radiant glow. Some accounts from antiquity suggest it could be seen gleaming from miles away, like a beacon in the desert. That shell is mostly gone now, removed over centuries by those who needed stone for other buildings, mosques, palaces, homes. In many ways, the pyramid has been recycled into the city of Cairo. Its peak once held a capstone, a pyramidion, possibly covered in gold leaf or electrum designed to catch the sun and mark the very top with divine light. That too is gone, fallen or taken, lost to time. The edges have softened, the corners eroded, but the core remains. The rough limestone blocks still lock tightly together, as if they haven't been disturbed since the day they were set. Over time, sand has risen and fallen around its base. The Nile has shifted its path. Empires have come and gone. Persian, Greek, Roman, Ottoman. Each one looked at the pyramid and asked, who built this, and how? Even the name of its builder, Khufu, was forgotten for centuries. The ancient Greeks called the pyramid Cheops' tomb, based on half-remembered stories. Later writers proposed it had been built by Joseph from the Bible, or by ancient giants, or civilizations long since lost. The more the stone stayed still, the more imagination moved. In 820 CE, the Caliph al-Mamun tunneled his way into the pyramid, hoping to find treasure. He found only dust and darkness. Others followed, pilgrims, scholars, robbers, dreamers. They found the same. And as centuries passed and memory blurred into mythology, more new eyes began to arrive. By the 18th and 19th centuries, European scholars, travellers and soldiers began to document the pyramids with increasing urgency. In 1798, Napoleon Bonaparte arrived in Egypt with a military expedition, but he also brought with him a corps of engineers, artists and scientists. They didn't come just to conquer, they came to measure. His team surveyed the pyramid, sketched it, recorded its angles and marvelled at its scale. Their findings were later published in a grand volume titled Description de l'Égypte, bringing the Great Pyramid back into the consciousness of the Western world. For many in Europe, this was the first time ancient Egypt had been presented not as legend, but as fact. Soon after, archaeologists and antiquarians followed. They arrived with notebooks and then with shovels. Some brought scientific rigour, others brought ambition. In 1837, British explorer Howard Vyse famously used gunpowder to blast his way into hidden chambers above the King's Chamber. It was an era when excavation sometimes meant demolition, and patience was not always a priority. But in one of those chambers, Vyse discovered something important. Red-painted marks left by the pyramid's original builders, including the name Khufu, written in a royal cartouche. It was the first direct evidence connecting the structure to its pharaoh. The pyramid began to shift in the public imagination. From mystery to monument, It became something to be catalogued, scaled, studied, and still never fully understood. Even with precise measurements, mathematical theories, and extensive mapping, the more people learned, the more unanswered questions remained. The exact construction techniques, the full purpose of certain chambers, the presence of hidden voids, all of it sat just beneath the surface, unresolved. And so the pyramid took on a second life. No longer just a royal tomb, but a canvas for curiosity. And today, that curiosity still surrounds it. Tourists arrive by the thousands. Some walk the perimeter in quiet awe. Others take selfies beside its base, or ride camels across the sandy foreground. At sunset, the structure glows gold. At night, it's lit artificially. A soft spotlight cast upon something that was never built for spectacle, and yet commands it anyway. Security fences surround the plateau now. Conservation efforts are ongoing. Restoration crews patch eroded stones. Nearby stalls sell souvenirs carved into miniature replicas, each one smooth and small. Nothing like the rough enormity of the real thing. And yet, despite the noise, the scaffolding, and the pressure of modernity pressing in from every direction, the pyramid remains still. From above, it casts a perfect shadow. Engineers and digital modelers have scanned it with lasers. Archaeologists continue to explore its tunnels, taking measurements down to the millimeter. Some believe more chambers remain undiscovered. Sealed voids, hidden spaces, architectural dead ends waiting to be explained. Others suggest that every mystery is already known, and that we've simply misunderstood the simplicity of its form. No one is quite sure, and perhaps no one ever will be. Because the pyramid was not built for us. It was not built for this moment, or this skyline, or this generation of theorists. In the modern era, the Great Pyramid is no longer a finished structure. It's a site under continuous maintenance. Exposure to weather, tourism, pollution, and time have all taken their toll. And while the core remains stable, the surfaces, particularly the stepped limestone facing, have begun to wear in visible, uneven ways. In the absence of its original casing stones, the pyramid is no longer smooth. It appears tiered, like a staircase. These layers were never meant to be seen. They were once hidden beneath a polished exterior. Now preservation efforts must decide, stabilize what remains, or attempt to restore what was. Restoration introduces its own risks. Replacing stones, even with good intentions, can disrupt the load-bearing systems put in place thousands of years ago. Misplaced mortar, incompatible materials, or even subtle shifts in alignment can alter the stress distribution of the structure. Architects and engineers working today must study the original construction not just for inspiration, but for survival. One approach focuses on non-invasive methods: laser scanning, photogrammetry, 3D modelling. These tools allow researchers to monitor microshifts in the structure without laying a single hand on the stone. Some blocks have moved by mere millimeters over decades. Slow tectonic signs that the pyramid is still breathing in architectural time. There's also discussion about what the pyramid's current form actually represents. Is the pyramid we see today an unfinished surface, or is it a revealed interior? From a design perspective, it's a rare case where we're seeing a skeletal framework that was never meant to be exposed. A permanent construction site frozen mid-stage. The absence of its smooth shell has even prompted design proposals to digitally reconstruct it. Virtual overlays showing how the pyramid would have appeared in its original state. These reconstructions aren't decoration. They're attempts to reverse engineer intention. because for an architect the exposed core isn't just ruin, it's a blueprint. And from that blueprint we've learned almost everything we know about how the ancient Egyptians thought about scale, symmetry and permanence. The pyramid's core masonry, rough-hewn limestone blocks arranged in progressively smaller courses, follows a consistent set of design rules. Each layer had to be level, load-bearing and interlocked. There are no adhesives, no mortar, just pressure, friction and mass. Each block supports the ones above it, transferring force downward through the structure in a clean, uninterrupted flow. This method, dry stone stacking with precise jointing, is not only stable but self-correcting. If a single stone shifted slightly during construction, the layers above would settle around it, redistributing the weight. The pyramid isn't rigid. It's heavy enough to absorb its own imperfections. At its foundation, the structure was cut directly into the bedrock, which, as it turns out, slopes gently across the site. The ancient builders corrected for this with a kind of early architectural levelling. They quarried down to a consistent plane, then raised low points with fitted blocks until the base was true. The result? A level platform across an uneven natural surface, one of the earliest known examples of engineered ground preparation on this scale. The accuracy is measurable. The pyramid's base varies less than 2 centimeters in elevation from corner to corner, the sides aligned within a fraction of a degree from true cardinal points, and despite the erosion, theft and collapse of its casing stones, the internal geometry remains intact. Nearly all deviations are the result of time, not poor execution. Inside, the arrangement of chambers and corridors also obeys an internal logic. The use of corbelled ceilings, stepped pressure relief blocks, and compartmentalized passageways reveals a structural language more advanced than previously assumed. The builders understood not just weight, but how weight moved, and what they created was not a decorative object, nor a symbolic shape alone. It was a functioning mass of interlocking forces, aligned, calculated and executed at a scale that still challenges replication. The pyramid doesn't just endure because of its size, it endures because of its architecture. And even now, beneath the stars, it continues to hold its place, just waiting, as it always has.